Welcome back to the Social Impact Level Up podcast. This is where we blur the lines between business, nonprofit, and impact. I'm your host, Wendy V, and I'm a social impact strategist here to help you build a successful and sustainable legacy of social change. In this week's episode, we're going to hear from a social entrepreneur who has been on a journey to change the world just like you. If you are interested in social entrepreneurship, this is the place for you. Let's jump right into this week's episode. Hey, this is Wendy V, and we're here with the Social Impact Level Up podcast. I have a wonderful guest with me that I met on LinkedIn. So this is our proof that social networking works on LinkedIn. And we're here to talk a little bit more about what is social entrepreneurship and how do you go about the basics of helping people through your business or nonprofit, and usually actually in this case, more business. But I know that my guest, Dale Archer, has tons of experience working with both businesses and nonprofits. So he'll tell you a little bit more about him in just a second. One of the things I really love about this podcast is that we want to talk in season 2 with people who are actually making an impact, who are social entrepreneurs. And this is really important to us because it's kind of hard to find examples of social entrepreneurship on the internet. And it's hard to find examples of real life people who have businesses that are operating social businesses. And so not only is today's guest Dale is operating himself as a social entrepreneur, but he's also helping others to operate in this space as well. And so helping us grow new ventures and helping people to explore entrepreneurship. So that is why it's exciting to have him here, because he can help amplify this message with me. And I wanted to just know a little bit more about you and how did you become known as the Startup Whisperer?
There's two parts of that story, but thank you for the wonderful introduction and for hosting me on your podcast. I really appreciate it. And thank you for sharing social entrepreneurism with your listeners, because I think it's a very important effort for anyone's life to go on that journey. Two parts of my story. One is history, and the second part is today's reality. I am a founder's mistake personified. I am the son of a preacher and business owner. So my parents co-owned a business together, and they pastored a church together when I was born. And so they only planned for my two older sisters, and so when I came along, it was the surprise. So founders do make mistakes, and I am a personified version of that. I always like telling that story. I used to be embarrassed by it, actually, and then it's become a source of strength. And now I can tell people that founders make mistakes early and often. An example of that, but you don't have to live a mistaken life, right? You can talk about the stuff that founders only whisper, right? And that's the second part of my story. Is today's reality is that people don't talk about the risks of being an entrepreneur, of being a founder, learning how to go from being a founder to being a CEO to being a leader, because those three things are three separate things. And so if you're an accidental founder, or you've always wanted to start a business, or you kind of stumble into it like a fish into a fishbowl, like I have, then you make the best of it. But you embrace those realities each step of the way, each day of the way.
Yeah, and I think for me, I fall into that third category of fish where just sort of like, oh yeah, I lost my job and now I'm founding my own company. And so I know what you mean, where it's sometimes you don't even know what mistakes you're making because you're like, oh, I am, I only know this much, but I have no idea what the rest of the road is or what it looks like. So it's helpful to have people like you who are supports, mentors, coaches, guides, sage, whatever, whatever term you want to use for it, to help, those of us out who are joining this, entrepreneurial venture, kind of, at whatever place we are in our lives, with all the things that come with us. And so I'm just curious, how did you get passionate about helping this group of people based on, your prior experience? Like, where did that come from for you?
I mean, I grew up around business owners in my extended family. I there are, more other than preachers and business owners in my family, there are more nurses, that I can shake a stick at. Uh, and so it was always just, you help people. It was the mantra of my family. You help people, you do the best that you can, you give back, and make a bucket doing it too. You have to make a buck to live. But it was always, how are you going to help someone else? And it was just beaten into my head. And so, the monkey see, monkey do process, kept on resonating, and it really is a passion though. I don't know how to do anything else. I don't make a good employee. I know that. And so, whenever you're working for yourself and you're working to help other people, you really do find what ignites you, and then what gets you out of the bed every morning.
Yeah, I find that for me, it's been the difference between me being happy with what I do every day and being happy and content in my life overall
Yep.
versus feeling like I'm working for someone else's mission or cause that isn't necessarily the way that I would want to work, even or with the value set that I have. So I think you're right. Like it's kind of difficult to buy into that anymore when you're like, yeah, I know I'm not the greatest employee because I don't want to have to, give up to someone else's values or someone else's way to work when I could, be here doing this on my own. And it does take a lot of help and knowledge and support. So thank you for doing that for people, being passionate about helping and giving back. Um,
Self-awareness is key though. What you're pointing out, it's super key to know exactly what you want and when you want it.
yeah, yeah. Can you say more about that? Like, what do you find with the people that you help that they need to actually be aware of in order to take this step? I mean, I'm sure like everything, right?
Um, it kind of goes to the fish analogy, questioning the water you breathe around you. And someone gave me an analogy a couple of weeks ago that, a fish passing another fish, asking, all the water over there. And the other fish all of a sudden realizes he's in water. Um, and I think that with founder or social entrepreneurs, they have to think of themselves as flowing through time and energy, because there is only amount of time that we have every day and week, month, quarter, right? And there's only amount of energy that we have. Whatever personality type you have, we were talking about this earlier. If you're an introvert, you use introvert type of practices and tendencies. And if you're an extrovert, that you charge with other people. So you have to be one, self-aware, and then modulate how you fit into your world, and then how you thrive and how you manage yourself in your world. Because once you realize that, you're going to make a lot more progress than having to fit someone else's mold.
Yeah, and I think with my, way of doing things, I would prefer to use my energy at my own pace, and I know now that I have the ability to give off energy at any time I want throughout the day versus saying, "Oh, I have to be here clocking in at 8, and I have to
Right.
stay and pay attention until 6," and in that entire time, I'm not allowed to do something else, think about anything else, run an errand, like, and, there was all these, like, limitations on it, and I felt like a caged bird. I think I was always feeling crazed about, having to sit and be seen for 8 hours in the
Yeah.
same spot,
Yes.
for people to think that you were working, right?
Yep.
And now, I can go and network, or I can be talking to people like you on Zoom and doing all these things that don't feel like work, but they are in fact work. And
Right.
so, it's interesting because then in some cases it's serving as well. So the social entrepreneurship aspect of being able to give and serve, but then also get that monetary benefit back in some way through that energy that you put out. We talk about that a lot on this podcast. And you kind of mentioned it like in pieces, but basically you are allowed to thrive as a social entrepreneur and you
That's
should
the
expect
point.
that yeah, I think so can you talk a little bit more about that part of it? Because I think people get, caught up thinking, "Well, will I make any money if I choose to help people?"
Well, I think that the challenge is you know, I kind of use the Frankenstein's monster as an analogy. Frankenstein's monster did not have a name. That every Halloween we say, whenever we see the monster, we say, "Oh, there's Frankenstein." That's not right. And so we have to think through how we monetize ourselves, if that's the product or service. Then if we actually do create a separate product or service from ourselves, then we have to name our monster because we're the Frankenstein, and we have to name our monster in that product or service. And then we have to then test that with other monsters and say, do you like my monster? Will you pay for my monster? And if they do, then that's a good product fit, right? And I think that you have to be cognizant of what is the product, what is the service, what is your offering, and then ask people to pay for it. There, I mean, I think that every entrepreneur says, "Well, I'll just help them. I'll just keep on helping them." But at some point, you have to establish an exchange for value relationship that becomes monetary,
Mm.
like, while being transformative, right? And that's where people can get hooked, uh, um, hanged up on, uh, hang up on your hangups, hooked up on your hangups is saying that will you pay me to help you? That's the switch, right? And you have to be confident in yourself to sell yourself, but you also have to know what you're selling, and then what they're going to pick up when you put it down.
Yeah, that's so true. Like, what is the actual transformation that happens as a result of you paying me? And it took a minute for me to even figure that out, even though I have proof of years of, transformation. It's like, how do you bottle that and say, like, I'm now going to put it out for you? And it was funny when you're talking about Frankenstein. I was like, well, maybe Dr. Frankenstein was a really good marketer, but he was really bad at that product self differentiation that you mentioned. And so that's why we confuse his product with him. Because even years
Right.
later, we're buying costumes. I mean, he's still generating money.
Yeah.
We're buying costumes with his name and calling it something else.
That's right.
So, it is interesting. But the idea that you can help others through your business and make an impact and still serve and still be happy and also thrive. This is a core set of messages that I love to repeat over and over again because people don't see themselves being able to step away from whatever golden handcuffs they have or whatever security they have in their 9 to 5 a lot of the times if they haven't stepped out on their own yet. But if they're already out and flailing and kind of like, I don't know what to do. I'm in the middle of this. You just gave a lot of really good advice. Like all like,
Oh man, the water is
yeah,
nice.
you gave like a bunch of different pieces right now of that, of knowing yourself, being self-aware, knowing your product and what you sell, being able to tell people that you're selling this and this is the transformation that they get. And those are all, very traditional parts of sales and marketing. But I think that in social entrepreneurship, the other layer is you can add to that you make an impact, and this is how you make an impact. And I think increasingly more consumers and even employees want to see the companies that they support or they work for making an impact. And so you also have this other whole benefit in social entrepreneurship to being able to use that impact to generate more income, more revenue, more customers, more interest. And I've seen that, even in my own business and my own experience of social entrepreneurship, that this actually does help and work. So, are there any other lessons based on, impact that we should be teaching social entrepreneurs? Like, what do you think?
Well, the one that comes to me whenever I think about that is the impact you envision versus the impact you achieve may not be the same thing. So we, I mean, you can go back to the Frankenstein analogy is that, you start building something and then you get to the finished product and you go, yeah, 6 months ago, 9 months ago, a year ago, our concept of this was completely different. I was talking to a founder in a tech SaaS project, and we were talking about the number of slides or pitch decks that they had gone through? And he said that we've gone through at least 50. And I said, look, you'll probably have 50 more because the iteration of your efforts and the drafts that everyone gives feedback to can hone it and make it better, makes it sharper, makes it better, makes it faster. So, pick your adjective that you're looking for. Pick the Frankenstein name you're looking for, and then slap it on there and say, "Does this fit?" And then will people buy it? Will people accept this change? If it's social impact, what sort of change are you trying to make in the world? And then did you make that change? And then was everybody happy with that change? Will they buy that change again? It's an iterative cyclical process that never stops. And I think that's the fun part about social impact is that as soon as we think we're going to change one thing, five other things are affected by it. And therefore we may cause more problems than we actually wanted, but that's great. Um, we're entrepreneurs. We'll fix more problems.
Or we'll recruit some more entrepreneurs in order to help them unlock their ideas and help us fix the problems. It's fine. Everybody just join on in. And I think you're right. The problems that we have as society are almost like as bountiful as there are places and
Oh yeah,
people
for
because
sure.
everything is has this opportunity to have been traumatized or broken or systemically, imposed racism or things and into the systems that operate around us. So there's a number of problems that we can fix as social entrepreneur. And I love the idea that tech is part of that solution. I know you work a lot with tech founders. Is there anything you can say specifically to tech founders about how they can be thinking about social entrepreneurship as a vehicle to not only express, their company, but also why is that part of a good part of your value proposition?
Don't build it and assume people will come. Don't fall into that trap initially. Be constantly reaching out to the people that this monster you're creating is going to be helping. What this product, what this service is going to be helping, and making sure that you have these two things aligned together. Because if you work if you if you work so hard and then no one comes, it reminds me of the Christmas Vacation quote that the kid he puts the lights together and the kid says and the lights don't come on, and the kid says, "But we work so hard," and then his grandmother says, "And so do washing machines." And so you can keep on churning round and round and round and washing all those clothes all day long that no one's going to buy them and wear them and then buy them again from you. Then what was the point? And so keep the end in mind and don't build it just because you want to build it. Build it because people demand it, need it, and will pay you for it.
Yeah, and I think the demand sometimes we don't know as entrepreneurs if people will pay you for helping others or, and even if you're thinking about getting, funding from grants or you're a nonprofit, you might have, other options, not just selling things to people that you could use to fund your venture. And so I know you've done a little bit of nonprofit work as well, or a lot of nonprofit work. I'm not sure how much, but what do you see as the difference between someone who's trying to found a nonprofit organization or supporting a nonprofit and growing versus someone who's really thinking about this from more of a social business or a business entrepreneurship side? What are the kinds of things that those two different people need to be considering?
Um, there are a lot more that well, it's a great question. One of the things I love about the work I do now is crossing the the great divide of for profit, nonprofit. And then I've also worked with, public private partnerships, fiscal sponsorships and government. But there's a lot more similarities across for profit and nonprofit that people don't either they just think that we're special on both sides of the fence and don't make the comparison, or they refuse to. But there's a lot of similarities. There's some distinctions and differences. But there's all the similarities. All founders are the same. All first time founders go through the same problems on both sides. they have to raise money. They're looking for investors. They're looking for donors. They're looking for funders. They may be called different and the process may be different, but you're still still looking for funding. Um, and cash flow is cash flow. Service leadership is service leadership. High team performance is high team performance. Now, you can get into organizational culture, and those are different. We found that out from the pandemic. We don't want to work for a toxic culture. So, and those happen on the for-profit side and the nonprofit side, right? So that you get warts in any type of human ecosystem you are in. And making a profit in the nonprofit world, or having a sustainable budget that, takes you into 3-4 years into the future of sustainability is great, right? It's the same comparison of what's your annual revenue, what's your monthly revenue, and what's your burn rate and your projections on the for-profit side. So there are a lot of similarities that can be tied together. We just either refuse to accept those, or we just want to keep on doing our own way. But I think that by being able to cross those sectors, you can find a lot more similarities and differences.
Yeah, and that's where I have a ton of experience creating multi-sector partnerships that cross public, private, and nonprofit, and are very diverse in their focus of what they're trying to do to make an impact, whether it's homelessness or educating young kids on healthy behaviors and mental health and all these other different social impact issues. And I think what I know from that experience too is if a nonprofit is not operating as a business, it is not going to be solvent. It is not going to be sustainable. And there are some pieces in there, even for those types of partnerships, like you were talking about, those public private partnerships, for them to be sustainable, the component organizations that make them up have to be sustainable.
Right.
And so, what we're really talking about is compounding on both sides of the fence, on all angles. How are we creating sustainable organizations in order for our larger change projects to actually happen?
Right.
'Cause a lot of the times, our larger change projects are multi sector partnerships, and they're usually funded and seeded by some sort of grant or some sort of fund, but it can't last forever. So a lot of the times what happens is exactly what you said. It kind of like just goes away because we don't have this idea of running everything like a business,
Now,
essentially.
to your point, on both sides, major donors, major funders are finally realizing that you need to fund a program more than 1, 2, or 3 years. It needs to have a runway of 5 to 7 years. And on the
Yeah.
for-profit sort of venture capital PE side, they are also realizing that your runway, if you want to exit anytime soon, that's in your 5 to 7 year range. And so, I mean, the similarity of 5 to 7 on one side and the similarity of the 5 to 7 on the other side, I mean, what does that mean in terms of our human behavior, right? Is that we need that long to feel like we are making an impact in whatever sector and whatever project and whatever industry we're wanting to make it. So,
Well, change takes a painfully long time.
yeah,
It really does. And it's iterative. And I think people forget about that. And I give this fact out all the time that it's going to take at least 5 years for you to get fully implementing something, get alone to actually influence something to be consistently changing in the future. So you
yeah,
might even get it just to the point of functioning in a different way.
right.
But that as soon as something is taken away, any support, it goes right back to the way it was. It's not an actual sustained effort going
Mhm.
forward. So it is hard, I think, for people to understand this timeline, but I always tell people it's actually more like 1 to 5 years just to get yourself to full implementation and scaling, and then another 5 to 10 years in order to figure out what is the real sustainable way to maintain this and to invest in the things that are successful, but
Mhm.
then divest from the things that are not successful.
Right.
And so when you're looking at, what is the long term, longevity of this in 5 to 10 years, it might look like you said before completely different
Yeah.
because where you
Sure.
started with the original idea 15 years ago was iteration 1. Now you're probably at iteration 30 or 40 and you're needing to sustain, whatever it looks like at that point. And if you haven't kept up with the marketing and kept up with your continuous quality improvement process or kept up with supporting through getting donors and funders interested in this. Things when they're at step 40, if you just kind of rely on data and information from step 1, going to be completely irrelevant to all those people.
Yeah.
So,
And, and you don't have to experience mission creep while you're doing that. You can keep
no.
keep your you can keep your North Star focused, and you're just iterating, at the middle, lower to middle line.
Yeah,
So
and you and I can see it so clearly because I
yeah,
think you and I think big picture and small picture. We have this like luxury that not everybody has. But I think that's why it's important to talk to folks like you to translate this for people because you as an organization can still stay even part of a multi-sector partnership and you're iterating your part of the process that you are responsible for as an organization, but that's contributing to the greater change of the partnership. And you can still do within your realm of your mission
yeah.
what you need to be doing. And I think that that's the cool thing about social impact work is we have the ability to layer, but I don't think we've gotten to the societal level of complexity to understand how this works with business and nonprofit the way you and I are talking about to really do some cool stuff. But I think that the more that we can gather folks and organize them and get them into networks and say, hey, here's some opportunities here, we could do some really cool things on a larger scale with the concepts that you and I are talking about right now.
And I think that the distinction between plan and planning, having a plan and planning is important here because I know President Eisenhower has said that your first plan never um, survives first contact with the enemy. So if you have a business plan or if you have a strategic plan, the first time you start implementing it, it's going to start changing. And so your planning from day to day has to keep the North Star, but it has to keep on moving it forward because you will encounter what people like and don't like about it for sure.
Yeah, and I think the planning process is difficult for people too, because especially after something like the pandemic, I've heard from some organizations that they haven't even endeavored to start planning with their board because they are still in like shock from what they were the trajectory before the pandemic, what the pandemic did to them as an organization, and then now feeling like they have space again, but how do we get back to visioning, where we want to be and then move forward? And that process can be confusing for people if you weren't even used to strategic planning in the first place, and now you're trying to plan your way out of a pandemic.
Well, callings.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, there's 2 people right here in this podcast who can help you out with different things. Give us a call. We'll be happy to be there.
That sounds painful just listening to it.
Yeah, maybe we need to start doing workshops together. So the last question I had for you around social entrepreneurship is really just this concept of social business and social entrepreneurship is difficult for people to sometimes understand. And they don't really just know enough about it, or it's new to them, or if they've heard about it, they're used to things like, really big companies who have a corporate social responsibility program or something formal. So if there's just a founder business who's thinking about social entrepreneurship and are like, okay, I want to make an impact through my business or my nonprofit, or my nonprofits already do this, but through my business, um, how can I get started? What can I do? Like, what are the basics that you would tell people of what they should be thinking about to get themselves moving in this direction of using their business as a vehicle to make impact?
It's funny that we have to ask this question, but I know it's prudent to ask it. And so then I come up with the question or just the curiosity of doing good and making money are not mutually exclusive. And and then I kind of go, why are we treating these as mutually exclusive? Is that if you're keep in mind, I'm in a Venn diagram of a business owner and a preacher's kid here. So I grew up knowing how to fit the Venn diagram together, walking Venn diagram. And so you can do good and you can make money. And I think a lot of, I think you saw a heightened part of this around the pandemic too, is that there are businesses that will say, for every product, a certain percentage goes to our key social impact passion. We're going to solve climate change. We're going to reduce homelessness. We're going to help with LGBTQ youth. We're going to help with veteran suicide, veteran disabilities, veteran homelessness, women, children homelessness. I mean, what is that thing that you are passionate about that you want to see change in the world? And then how do you combine that with making money? And because, you know, if we love our capitalist society, that's not going away anytime soon. We have to figure out a way to bring all these pieces together and say, yes, there are challenges in our world, and we can have a business that serves others. So I think it's a matter of, what is the gap? What is the need that you are seeing out there? How do you merge it with your social impact passion, and then develop some strategy and some tactics and some ops that makes it happen? Because you can make it happen. That's what social entrepreneurs do, is they find a need, get out there, and they get it done.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't have to be as hard as which what I hear you saying is this doesn't have to be as hard as going through all of this like formal planning and all these other things. There are things you could probably be doing right now that definitely could start you on this path. So if you're not already there and then you're exploring or just understanding from this podcast a little bit more, this is again something that you can develop your impact mission right along with your mission for profit. They don't need
So
to be mutually exclusive. They could be supportive of one another, and in fact, you'll find that your impact mission actually amplifies your mission for profit. So, just a couple of social entrepreneurship basics. Anything you want to tell our audience about you and how they can find you or where they should connect to you? What are you working on right now that they might be interested in? What people who want to work with you, how do they work with you? Any Dale commercial you want to give, feel free
sure.
to go ahead.
Well, uh, I am a I offer fractional chief operating officer services plus some chief financial officer fractional services too, nonprofits especially. And then as on the for-profit side, for those founders who are their first time or their second time, and they need that first time, that their inaugural COO or fractional COO, to help them build their team, I can also help them with that process. And we don't think of, whenever we're being an entrepreneur, when we're, especially our first time or being a first time founder, of thinking of what I call human operating systems, of making sure that what does your day look like on a, a regular basis, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly. They get into what is your business plan? What does your strategic plan look like? And then how is all that aligning to you and your North Star and your team? And drawing a picture of what your organizational structure looks like. But then at the same time, what does your broader ecosystem look like? Because it goes back to what we were saying earlier, is that founders become CEOs, then become leaders, and pretty soon you're leading a small community of hundreds, if not thousands, of people. That impact alone is pretty cool to think about, as you are going through this process of creating your Frankenstein on the social or nonprofit side. So I think I'm happy to be here and to help them through that process. And I'm available on LinkedIn and Twitter, PR Whiz Guy on Twitter, and Dale Archer on LinkedIn. So hit me up and let me know how I can help you.
And we'll make sure your contact info gets into the show notes so people can connect with you. And I mean, I will be in that journey. So I'm like, okay, noted. When I get to a certain level and I need to hire a certain guy, I know who's already in my penciled into my organizational structure. And I think that that's important because, you want a good, solid business partner who's going to help you with those kinds of business infrastructure things. And especially as you're growing from a solo person to a small business or small nonprofit, it's important to have that. If you don't have it internally and you're able to hire for it yet, if you can get a resource like someone to contract for it, that's amazing. So thank you for that. Yeah.
My I have a special fondness in my heart for co-founders. So if you have a co-founder situation, definitely call me, because I definitely can help
Oh, you like when people have like a 2 or more people who are founding together essentially.
you.
That's yeah, because that presents, like its own set of problems, its own set of challenges that need to be navigated.
My dad used to say, if you have 10 people, you have 10 problems. But if you have 10 people, you have 100 problems. So
They're
the
keep
more
expanding.
the expanding aspect of people's needs and challenges. So yeah.
Yeah.
So think of the challenges you have as one founder, then combine that with the number of founders you have starting a business. So that can be in of itself a fun
Yeah,
experience.
I know exactly what you said. The thought process of going from one person to many people to thousands of people to being able to have collective impact and amplifying. That is exactly what we're doing with the social impact level of podcast, is bringing together voices that are either traditionally marginalized or hard to access in order to amplify and give people the skills for them to continue to level up and thrive. And that is a big part of what we're doing with this podcast and all of the platforms that we have for social impact level up collective. So it is going to be interesting to see what is my journey like in that, because I can totally see exactly where you're going. And I'm like, ooh, suddenly I have a very big village. What am I doing with this big group of people? So yeah, I appreciate exactly what you said. So thank you so much for being here and sharing all this wisdom with us today. I really, really enjoyed this conversation as always with you. We're in the same region, so we need to connect in person.
Well,
Um, and if there's anything else you want to say to our audience, go ahead. I'll give you the last word and then we'll sign off.
just be courageous, and whenever you think that the road is uncertain, just keep on pressing on because it does get better.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I have had those moments. So I appreciate that completely. Thank you, Dale Archer, for
Thank
being
you very
here.
much.
Thanks for having the time in your schedule to be here with us and with our audience and all the things that you shared today. Thank you to all our listeners who are here on the Social Impact Level Up podcast for season 2. You're hearing stories of social entrepreneurs who are making a real impact through their business or their nonprofit. And we're so excited to have Mr. Dale Archer here with us today for this journey. And just a wonderful week to you, and blessings and all of things to all of our community. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Social Impact Level Up podcast. It's been awesome to interview today's guest, and I hope that you leave inspired to take action. If you're looking for any of the information we spoke about, it's probably down in the show notes. Make sure that you're checking them out and you're clicking on any of the links that seem exciting to you. If you are looking for a coach or a consultant to help you with your social impact or your sustainability, reach out to me via my website, hop on my email list, or jump into one of my programs. All of the links are below. So excited to have you as part of the collective. Make sure that you come back and join us for another episode next week.